I was meditating this morning and decided what does that even mean to elevated consciousness? What would be the posts or the indication along the way that you're elevating, you're going higher? When you climb a mountain like Mount Everest or some high, you get the signposts along the way. You're now 5,000, you're now 10,000, 15, 20. And on, and you know that you're going higher because of the signs, but not just that. You know you're going higher from the less amount of oxygen, that you have to work harder as you go higher. But when we go to Tibet, we've been there 3 times. We tried to go a 4th, but we got stopped by the Maoists in Nepal. You can really feel a difference when you're at 17.5. I don't know what that is in meters, how you guys count, but it's really, really high. And you know, because it's a shortness of breath, you have to really take one step at a time. You are knowing in your body that you're elevating. I think we can almost see it as a metaphor in consciousness. Not that the oxygen gets less and thinner, but we find also, as we elevate in consciousness, how much more work we have to do, and how our minds doesn't let us do or get away with what we could do before in consciousness. Your mind gets cleaner, it gets crisper. We say it's like walking the double-edged sword. Then why would we do it if it's harder? Because there's an elevation in the amount of happiness that we're receiving from it. And then we can really see that work is a worship. Or work is one of the best things we can do in our lives. And then we start going that direction instead of the other way, perhaps how to make life easier, how to do less. And I always laugh when people talk about retiring, and it's like means to repeat. So like reopen the door, retire. So it would be to be more tired, to repeat tiredness. It's a stupid word, really, because it doesn't imply anything positive. People work their whole lives, and what they really want to do is relax a little bit. In India, it's different than this, though. You spend the first 25 years as a seeker of truth, just not really knowing, but it's okay. You're comfortable to not know clearly what your destiny, clearly what you're going to do, and all of that. First 25 years. Second 25 years, you become a householder, we say. If your destiny is to have children, to be in a relationship, to have a career. So you work 25 to 50. And then at 50, instead of retiring to an old people's home or to Leisureville, then they dedicate their lives back to God. And many times, couples that will have raised their children, been married for a long time, they become nuns and monks, and oftentimes they'll go to different ashrams and dedicate their life to seva and to serving and to helping and to really, in the long run, prepare for the last breath. And we know different women that do that, and they're just so happy. Doesn't mean they never see their families, no. They visit, they know their grandchildren, but they've dedicated their life to selfless service. So it's a very different way, a very different goal setting than what we do. I can only speak really for the United States, and that's to get enough money in the bank, or, quote, security, which is not really real anyway, so that you can then just kick back and maybe travel or do this or that or play golf all the time. And our family, I think through the grace of our mother, who was quite a beautiful being, taught us that the really only fulfillment in life or true happiness was to serve. And she was a living example of that. I do believe that there's many different paths to elevate consciousness, and each one has a different destiny of how they're going to reach that clarity or that consciousness or the ultimate happiness. For some people it's bhakti, it's just devotion. They're just so devoted to chanting, to praying, to helping the world on that level. Other people it's seva, just get out there and serve the people, whether you're doing it here in South Africa in different programs for children, for young adults, feeding the children, educating the people. There's every time you look around, there's so much you can do here. So that would be seva. And there's other ways to do it, but I find that those two ways, meditation, doing sadhana, doing prayers for the world, all of that will elevate your consciousness. But back to the road signs, to let us know how we know we're elevating our consciousness. For me is, am I happy more and more and more? And is the happiness not dependent upon the outside circumstances? Can I find that internal light shining, that no matter what, if it's rough, if it's hard, can we go with the flow, you might say? And I watched this in Frankfurt. Little Sheva and I have been married 28 years. And I watched this in times where it was so hard we didn't know if we could make it. For all the challenges God always gives us, it gives everyone. But how we're dealing with the challenges now is so much better, it's so much easier. Like, I think 10 years ago in Frankfurt, when we couldn't get on the plane, we had to move classes around in Joburg. We didn't know the unknown, what the American embassy would give us, and would we end up having to go back home or stay in Frankfurt a week. We just went with the flow, and we actually enjoyed it immensely. And one of the first things is to teach a person to breathe. We birth every single new day, but how do we birth with more grace, with more dignity, with more strength? Yogi Bhajan said the perfect test is to be graceful, to learn grace at the most ungraceful times. But there's a spirit inside of us that wants to push us onward, whether it's a marathon or a bike or a boat or children, whatever it is. There's an innate spirit that wants to take us to our limits. Because I do believe when you get to those limits, it's either you break or you surrender to God. And it's that surrendering that takes you into consciousness. And it doesn't have to be as big as climbing Mount Everest or going on a really rugged river raft race. It's every day. Listening to your children, listening to your body, listening to your consciousness. And little by little it gets cleaner and cleaner. I remember this one line, I can even remember the placement on the page. He said, there are those who know and those who don't know. And another image that has stayed with me for years is in a book. It was either Steppenwolf or it was Damien. And he writes that there was this winding road. It was like, reminded me like it could have maybe been, it was Herman Hesse. It could maybe be like a road in San Francisco, but he was German. And it was a brick road, and it had a lot of shops along each side of it. And there was one storefront that people went into if they could see the door. And most people couldn't. They just passed it. It didn't exist for them. But those that went in, and remember he described it, and it was like going into an enlightened state. It was like opening the door, and they were like, it was like a heavenly abode. But most people passed, they didn't even see the door. And if you were blessed, and the same, going back to Krishnamurti, there are those who know, those who don't know. There's a lot of people that reincarnate who will not ever have the experiences that you have. They will just live ordinary, struggling, really hard lives. And they'll probably die in that manner. Because they didn't get the blessings or the good fortune or the reincarnation. They hadn't done it enough to be sitting here today. They're not good nor bad. You're not any better than them. It'd be saying a monkey is way better than a zebra. No, a zebra's a zebra, a monkey's a monkey. You have a certain caliber, they have a certain caliber. We might even, if we were able to, find out how many lifetimes they had been here, not as many as yours. So therefore, they wouldn't have this opportunity yet. But they will one day, for we all have to. That there's different realms of consciousness. And to do as much as you can this lifetime, to raise your consciousness, to serve, to clear history that doesn't let you forgive. To do as much as you can to uplift humanity, to keep your health good. To not let your mind take you down into depression. Because you've earned this lifetime. You have the good fortune. You're so blessed. You're a very small percentage on the planet. In other words, don't blow this lifetime. Do something to help others. And train your mind so you don't go into depression where you have to go for pharmaceuticals and on like that. Seek out those who are on the same path to elevation, maybe not the same religion. That doesn't matter. But use this lifetime well. Don't waste it. Because I don't know what will happen next lifetime if you do. And that's what I'm talking about when you don't have a choice. And many of you are at that point now. You can't go back. 6, 7, 8, 9 months pass, and that person comes up. Wow, I have to tell you something. I'm not a vegetarian anymore. I said, why? What happened? I started feeling really weak. I started feeling so weak. And so I went to my doctor. Of course, go to the doctor. And the doctor said I was protein deficient, iron deficient, and that I had to eat meat again. How do you feel now? I feel great. I feel really good. But really, what they're saying, because it happens often, their ego was about to surrender. They were losing the personality that is fed by meat, which is stirred from anger, a bit of fear, a little bit of aggressiveness, a little bit like I'm going to do it. So when you have, especially like a career, and you don't have that feeling or that drive that you had that motivated you before, you equate it to getting weak. But really what it is a surrender into a whole other space in your consciousness that will give you so much more creativity, real strength, which isn't built on aggression